I'll give everybody a moment here to log in and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, thank you so much to our attendees for joining us. We're glad to have you with us tonight. I'm Lynn Funy-Hatton, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Gatanis to get started.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Welcome everybody to the May operations meeting. Hope you had a good day, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. And with that, Mike, can you please give us a roll call?
Mr. DeFrank.
Here.
Ms. Frick.
Here.
Mr. Gatanis.
Here.
Ms. Glenister.
Here.
Mr. Ganal.
Here.
Mr. Hattinger.
Here.
Ms. Klinger.
Here.
Ms. Nemitz.
Here.
And Mrs. Ziegler.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, that takes us to item 2.1, food service presentation. Mr. Nicholas, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I know your last name. I always know you as being Nick or Nico.
Chef Nick is fine. Chef Nick works.
Okay, all right, Chef Nick. All right, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Is the presentation being shared, or am I just going?
I can pull it up real quick. Hang on one second.
Okay.
I got it, Mike, if that helps.
I can do it.
So Nick, why don't you introduce yourself as Mike pulls that up?
Absolutely. So my name is Nicholas Correa. I am I've been around the district since SFE partnered with the school district over the last couple of years. I had a great opportunity to build a wonderful rapport with the staff. During the pandemic, Camille moved back to Arizona, and in her absence, I stepped in to take over the food service operation and, really take it head on. The pandemic has really put everything, the whole world on its head, and, food services not, excluded from that. And, we've had our challenges over the course of the year, but I've always said that we have a great staff here at Salisbury, and the ladies and gentlemen put in a tremendous amount of effort to, really deliver, and in some cases even over deliver to our greater community. So I'm super fortunate to be leading that team, and they make it, wonderful to come to work every single day. So kudos to y'all for, bringing them on board and creating that atmosphere where everyone wants to pitch in and be successful. So starting with, the first slide, just want to show kind of where we were last year and where we are currently. We did have, so as we looked at bringing over staff from the school district to the FSMC, we had to make sure that we offered a position for every single employee that was on staff on the district side when they were coming over. We did have some folks that were not interested in coming back during the pandemic, either due to modified duty or just, being fearful. And we understand that. We do have those people still on standby. So when we do come back to a place where, we come in, full face to face and they're comfortable coming back, I'll have a position for them. We did have some people over the last couple of months that, have decided to, look elsewhere for opportunities, and, we wish them well as well. And we understand that, we've been asking a lot of our staff, much more than we've asked from them before. And I'll be the first to tell you, coming from the restaurant side, hotel side, school food service, you're doing just as much work, and you're still dealing with the same crunches, and, you have the right people in those kitchens to, really put the best foot forward and make it happen every single day. Looking at last year versus this year, we did about 750 meals. I wouldn't even say last year, but, on a normal school year, we're looking at 750 meals a day. And this year we're around 430. And you see the splits of what it is in person versus curbside. As the weather gets better and sports comes back, that curbside number is going to continue to tail off a little bit. But, as we go into summer feeding, those numbers will obviously pick back up. Next slide, please. So talking about, meal service, we were looking at curbside. We're looking at non-congregate feeding. We're looking at different ways to communicate to the community and get them in, understanding that, we have to provide meals, especially for those that are that have food insecurities. We want to make sure we partner with the SROs, Salisbury Township Police Department, and getting those meals out to families that, didn't have access to them. So we've been really fortunate to be able to partner with them and to do that. So also with our social workers as well. Next slide, please. So looking at, April through August, just how we kind of patched it together really to finish out the last school year. We were looking at we actually did meal service out of 2 sites following the SSO meal pattern. Now, what's advantageous about doing SSO versus SFSP is that it doesn't put us in a position to be audited. SFE, strives to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and making sure that we're compliant every single day. So we weren't necessarily worried about that, but to add added pressure to unfamiliar circumstances didn't make a whole lot of sense. So we went the SSO route, and we were serving a straight serve-only menu, and we found a lot of success with that. And we really try to do everything we can to keep costs down to an absolute minimum. Understand that food, all companies, all school districts are going to be after the same type of commodities through the mainline vendors. We understand there were going to be some scarcities and some shortages, so we had to anticipate that. But we really want to make sure we use what we had on hand and move that inventory in and out of our kitchens. Next slide, please. And that's no different from, how we're operating today. So, the meals that you see that are being served on the line are the same menus that are going to be pushed out the door. We want to make sure we're streamlining as much as we can so that we're cross-utilizing that product and making sure we're running as fiscally responsible operation as we can. Going into the academic school year, going into before face-to-face, we stay with the SSO model. As you can see, starting the year, as we all know, face-to-face was suspended. We wanted to switch over because during the summertime last year, we were doing a hot option at pickup along with cold options for ease of service and making sure we're able to do it as safely as possible. We switched to serving all items cold and frozen. So those items are being prepped, cooled down, put into containers, stored to ensure food safety. And also, understanding the constraints we have when it comes to storage, so it was advantageous for us to go this route. During this time, we used our mobile ordering app to partner with our teachers. We understood that, they were in the buildings and, they had an opportunity. They were our captive audience at that time, and we wanted to do something special for them. And we have seen, some consistency in those sales as well. As you can see, the breakdown we have in the participation around 458, 300 at the elementary, and 550 at the middle school. What I will also mention here is that during this time, we were also offering during the academics day, and also a PM meal service. We wanted to make sure we're touching as many families as we could and reaching them when it was convenient for them. And we felt as though that this really did benefit the program, as we really saw the split almost 50-50. So just to, looking forward from this, over the next week or so, I'll be sending out a survey to parents, asking them about their interest in the summer feeding program and seeing if this would be also an advantageous opportunity for them so we could better serve the community. Next slide, please. So what we learned, not all campuses are frequented evenly. There is way more students that come in, or way more families that come and pick up at the elementary campus than the western side of town at the middle school campus. I send text messages out daily on the days that we do meal service, and I'm sure people are probably sick of seeing my text messages come through, so I do apologize. But the families that do come are super appreciative of them because they sometimes do forget. And if anyone is hearing about this for the first time, we do meal pickup service for any remote or hybrid learners on Mondays from 5 to 6 p.m. Understanding that, we are doing a straight serve menu, so there are some limitations as to what is available on that menu because of it's being what's menued that day. Getting some feedback from the families when they're coming up. We had a family said that, hey, listen, we're seeing a whole lot of chicken. So we took the opportunity to, put some other items, using ground beef, whether it be, beefy mac or tater tot casserole or shepherd's pie and things of that nature, just trying to offer a little bit more variety. We realized that how we were putting the bags together weren't really effective. So we had to look at, other ways to be innovative and keep costs in line and kind of streamline as much as possible, especially when we're doing it from 2 different sites, making sure that they're uniform and we're working with our vendors to get the right products in. Looking at bulk milk was another big step for us in that direction. It cut down the amount of time that we're putting together those bags. Also, it was a lot more advantageous for our families. When we did our holiday meal, or at least, going into from October into November and through December, the marketing that we did to advertise the holiday meal and, reaching out to community, we really saw an increase in terms of the amount of meals that we're being able to serve. Many of those nights, we'll prep what we would need to have. And for the last, 15 to 25 minutes of that night, we're building bags to order. Each one of those bags is 5 breakfast, 5 lunch. So 25 meals per bag. And, when you're doing that for, 15, 20 people, it is a lot to do at one time. And it made me remember my times working in restaurants. So it was fun. But again, the families were, very patient with us during those times. So we could kind of figure out where our numbers were because we were growing so very rapidly over those couple of weeks. And they were super appreciative of the holiday meal. I'm really happy that the staff was able to, get it out and make it somewhat special considering, the type of environment we were in. So next slide, please. So from back to back to now, so from face-to-face learning to where we are right now, as you can see in our storage areas, that's what it looks like on a Monday when we're getting ready for meal service. The bags will come out of the freezer, they go into the fridge, and it's wall to wall. That along with, all of the milks and stuff. So, we do have the facilities to support that. And when we were in the summer, we're doing the 500 meals a day. That whole walk-in unit will be completely full, side to side from storage to the wall of all bags being prepped, ready to go. So it is quite the operation at the elementary campus. We did see a drop, obviously, when the students came back to face-to-face learning. We went from, doing about 140 meals down to, around the 90 mark. We tried to implement a la carte purchasing at the high school to kind of make up some of that lost revenue. Where we saw the revenue, and we'll show in a later slide, was just really in the breakfast participation, and some of the lunch participation kind of dipped. Kind of different from what we kind of expected. We did anticipate some of the breakfast stuff, but as you'll see, there is a large discrepancy between what that was. We also, at the understanding that we're trying to get the kids through as quickly as possible, we really looked at, what our lines were going to be. We wanted to streamline them as much as possible. Currently at the K-8 level, we are doing 2 items. At the high school, we're doing 4 items daily. Next slide, please. So understand that we are doing concurrent prep and cooking in the elementary campus. We really had to look at, what made the most sense in terms of being able to assemble the bags during the day and prepping those meal items during the same time that we're still trying to get meal service served for the kiddos that are in-house. We looked at a lot more IW products, especially for breakfast items. You'll typically see a a made breakfast sandwich or something like that will be the different there. But, doing breakfast for lunch out the door, seeing more chicken sandwiches and stuff like that has been pretty uniform, especially as we're going into the warmer months. We're not having some of those heavier casseroles type dishes. And then, like I said, as we transition from using the big bags, t-shirt bags, just looking at, what made the most sense in terms of space and fiscal responsibility. So participation by meal type, before going face-to-face, it was pretty much 50-50. If a student was coming for meal service, for meal pickup, they got a breakfast and they got a lunch every single day for all 5 days. When the students obviously came back, we're only capturing 29% of those students for breakfast. It's the largest discrepancy is actually at the high school level, where we typically have only 15 to 20 kids participate for breakfast. And then we see about a third of the lunch participation comes for breakfast at the middle school and elementary levels. So going back 2 years, the year that we had, COVID and the stoppage to where we're at now, I just kind of want to show what the participation was. So again, breakfast, being able to serve breakfast to every single student was absolutely instrumental for us to maintain profitability during this period. Looking at the lunch participation, we are down versus, last year in terms of where we're headed. So last year we were on trend. We were beating all the numbers for the year prior. And we were really proud of where those numbers were and where they were going. And then, we had the stoppage, the school closure, and, that kind of halted everything, but we were just trying to find ways to continue to keep families engaged and have them come in and participate with the meal program. So by the numbers, this is where we're at right now. We served, almost 140,000 meals. So that within itself is a huge success. And just looking at where those numbers are versus the last, couple years, where we should be. We do have a couple more weeks. We'll probably pick up an additional 11 to 14,000 meals. So we'll be in a good spot. And then as we continue to start with the summer feeding, we'll have revenue being generated during those times where we wouldn't have any. So that should help make up some of where we're at. Right now, we're sitting around a deficit of 58,000, probably closer to 59,000 after I redid the numbers. But in comparison to where that was last year, or even 2 years ago, considering the circumstances and how the gap that we have versus participation from then to now, we've been able to kind of stay on track. And like as I said before, as we move into summer feeding, we'll be able to have more revenue to close the gap there as well. A la carte sales this year has been only at the high school. And again, it's only been since, the second week of February that we came back. We're around $1,800 versus, almost, 69,000 the year prior. So as we get into a more manageable situation where, we can have a more robust a la carte, we'll be able to, see that as well. But if we, if you're looking at where we're at for a la carte, having that revenue into where we're at, we'll be in a much different situation as well. Successes and challenges, successes is, we're able to, really push participation, having that community partnership, seeing some of that decreased volume for some families, there were a lot of challenges, but all in all, everyone really stepped up to the plate. The partnership with facilities, and them working side by side to make all the accommodations that they could make, to put us in a position to be successful. And, with the administration, it's really been, all an effort to, feed our kids. So it's really humbling. And with that, I open up to any questions if you have any.
May I just make a statement?
Yes, ma'am.
It's not really a question. Kudos to you, Nick, and to your staff. All this you're saying is like, oh my goodness, how does he organize all this? And look at all the hard work that everyone has done. And I just want to thank you and your staff for feeding our students and continuing to have a positive outlook and continuing to take on the challenge. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to echo that to you, Nick, and SFE. All through this planning, we just sort of continued to look for opportunities. And, we started with meal service, and I remember saying to Nick, can we add a second site? Sure. Can we add curbside pickup for libraries? Sure. Can we send updates to families through text message and email? Sure. We just kept kind of coming up with ideas, and Nick has always been really grounded in providing the best opportunities for our learners to really make sure that we were able to get the food out to them and to our families. And, his answer is sure, and then he figures it out, and he partners with facilities, and our director of facilities and safety, Bill Brackett, and his team has worked hard to, figure out the traffic patterns and, get the carts and, navigate some of the operational challenges so that you could make this happen. And we really appreciate your partnership with SFE and the work that you personally have done to motivate your team to provide these opportunities. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question. Just to echo the others, like what you've done this year in the past 15 months is just amazing. If I could point out one meal in particular that I am thankful for, it's that Thanksgiving meal, the meal where we typically as parents get to come into the schools to eat with our children. It was so much fun to be able to pick up that food and have that meal at our own kitchen table. So thank you for that. It was just like a little piece of normal when we all really needed it.
Absolutely.
My question is, what can we do to better serve the families with food insecurities? What other help do you need in that area?
Well, I think it's identifying who they are first and foremost. And, if they, they reach out, whether they're reaching out to myself or through, the guidance office, once we can identify who they are, then we can then, navigate how we're going to be able to get food to them. And we encourage that. We want to make sure that, we're in the buildings, we have the food, we want to get it out. We want to make sure that it's going to someone that needs it. And what we get a lot of times too is that families say that they don't want to participate because they're worried that they're taking from somebody else, and that's not the case. We're in a position where any supplemental foods that we could provide to families is strongly encouraged. So for anyone that's attending, if you know anyone, or if this is news to you, please get the word out. We're more than happy to service you and provide a good meal.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Nick, I do applaud you for being flexible and how you handle everything from day in, day out. Like even the move from cartons to like the quarts and the half gallons, huge impact, because not only is it easier on you, but it's easier at home because it's a space saver. I mean, when there's a lot of food coming in the house, you got to make sure you have a place to put it, and just even being that, those little things make a huge difference in how well the whole package is received. So, way to be flexible and open to trying different things.
Sure. And I also want to mention that during the long holiday breaks that we had, we also partnered with Giant the Peapod group to get cans. So that way we were able to provide shelf stable items during those longer periods. So looking at those opportunities, looking at the calendar and trying to find those opportunities to get food out and then make sure that it's, shelf stable and the students are going to have the time to eat it during those periods was really important. And, if, those are things that we have to look at moving forward, we'll be happy to do so as well.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Chef Nick? Seeing none.
Yeah, I'll say too, I thought it was great and I enjoyed going over and picking it up. I was picking up food at the middle school and seeing the cafeteria ladies and the police officer. It was just so well run. It was really nice. And I'm so proud of us for doing that and getting it out to people. I think that's amazing. And especially now, I'm really happy we were able to do that and do it so well.
That's great.
You bring up a really good point that we didn't thank our school resource officers who also, took some meals and delivered them and supported food service during the program. So thank you to them for their partnership too.
Yes. Okay, Chef Nick, I'd like to continue the Love Fest, but all I'd be doing is repeating everything everybody else said. But one thing I want to add to that is, and on my behalf, I owe you an apology. It shouldn't take a presentation like this for you to get a thank you from me. And I sometimes like you get so caught up in the curriculum and everything else, the actual teaching of the kids, that I don't see the forest through the trees sometimes. And I just apologize to you for not thanking you sooner. Okay. Thanks again, Nick. Okay, before I move on, I have to make a statement. Pursuant to Board Policy 1D5, all meetings of the Salisbury Township School District are audio and video recorded. The district disclaims any and all liability arising from the recording of messages of meetings and for any statements made by those in attendance. So now that I have that out of the way.
And to follow up, if you'd like to make a comment during the public comment portion, please add your name and address into the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right. That now takes us to substitute. Did you want to make the introduction there, Lynn, or substitute service Tara Mossman?
Sure, just very quickly, tonight we have our coordinator of human resources. Maybe you have not had a chance to meet Tara yet. Tara joined us in a pretty crazy time with COVID here. And we have been looking at many of our staffing challenges and trying to identify solutions for next year. So Tara's going to share a possible solution with you this evening.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tara Mossman. I'm coordinator of human resources with Salisbury Township School District. And tonight I'm going to share with you some information about the SOS Group and the services that they can provide to our district. So as you all are aware, this year has been challenging in many ways. One of those challenges for the Human Resources Department has been recruiting and hiring of substitutes. As we begin to look upon the upcoming school year, we have been trying to find ways that we can have access to a larger number of substitutes. I would like to share a little bit of information about the SOS Group. So interesting, when I met with them, they shared with me that they are a group of retired administrators, and they came together to provide a service to school districts. The SOS Group believes that school districts deserve dedicated support staff, relevant trainings, and effective administrative operations to meet the needs of today's students. Some of the positions that the SOS Group provides substitutes for are instructional assistants, custodial maintenance, and nurse assistants. As we began to discuss this option, we didn't feel that there was a need to use a service for our teachers because the current process that we're using is working well. A short time ago, can you change to the next slide, Mike? A short time ago, I was able to meet with a few other substitute service providers. And in speaking with some of these providers, they were willing to work with our district, but they wanted to provide services for all positions. And again, we felt like our current process with our teachers was working. The SOS Group was the provider that was willing to work with our district and provide the services where we had needs. As we talked with the substitute service providers, we wanted to feel comfortable with the process. And we were able to reach out to a local district that partners with the SOS Group. I spoke with the Director of Pupil Services at the Brandywine Heights School District to see how their experience has been, and she provided me with a high recommendation. Some of the benefits for having the substitute service would be a larger substitute pool. So currently, we have 4 instructional assistant substitutes working. We do not have any custodial maintenance substitutes that are working. And we have 5 nurse assistant substitutes. Other benefits would be higher pay rates for substitutes, easier compliance with the Affordable Care Act, and it would provide district efficiency in regards to recruiting, onboarding, and tracking of clearances. On the next slide, I would like to share with you the rates for the SOS Group versus the rates for Salisbury Township School District. The instructional assistant rate that they would provide would be $13.50 an hour. Our current rate is $10.25. Custodial maintenance would be $15 an hour. The current rate for our district is $12.25 an hour. The nurse assistant rate would be $18.50 an hour. We provide $140 per day. And at their rate, it would be $143.37 per day. So, and just to clarify, underneath of those rates for the subservice, I shared with you the billed rate. The billed rate is the rate that SOS would charge with their operational costs, which would also include FICA, advertising, and recruiting, and their onboarding process. So at this time, I welcome your questions.
I have a question, Tara. What is our current program that we use for teacher substitutes?
So currently, we hire all of our substitutes within the district.
Right. I like that too, personally. I think that it, with our size of a district, that it's nice to have substitutes who know the students a lot of times, you know, and know the teachers and have had a lot of experience within our schools.
And one of the benefits with the SOS Group is that we can still utilize the current subs that we have. So if we have an instructional assistant that needs to take a day off, we can offer it to the 4 substitutes that we have working in our district. If they're not able to take the shift, then we would be willing to reach out to the SOS Group and say, we're looking for a substitute to fill this position. And they would reach out to their larger group and see if anyone would be willing to fill the position. So it still allows us the flexibility to use our subs that we hire for these positions, but also have that larger pool of substitutes.
Tara, at what point would we be voting to implement this? And I'm assuming this needs a board vote, but when would you be hoping to start this?
We would be hoping to start this for the next school year. So I think that we had discussed possibly voting on it in June.
So we sent the agreement to the attorney for review. There are a couple of concerns, so we are waiting to get that information out and resolve the agreement, and we would potentially bring it to the June board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Like the present subs we had, you said you would go to them first. Now, would they still get the same rate that the people through the SOS district would get? Or could they be hired by the SOS Group?
So they would still get the rate that they get through our district as a substitute, but they would have the option to be hired through the SOS group if they chose. And the benefit of that for them as well is that where they can only work when they're one of our employees up to 29 hours in a week because of the Affordable Care Act. If they chose to go and be employed with the SOS group, they would have the option of working up to 40 hours in a week, 5 days a week if they chose. They wouldn't be our employees as substitutes anymore.
Okay.
Now, Carol, one of the benefits for them to stay our employees, though, is they're eligible for PSERS, which they would not be eligible. So there would be benefits for them to stay district employees as well. So there could be pros and cons to both sides, and they'd be eligible to do whatever they need to do that's best for them.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
The only-
Tara, I have to say that this is a nice program considering the challenges that the school district is finding in today's environment, staffing a lot of different critical positions. And not that we need to do it all the time, but having that flexibility to meet the needs, like you said, a person can take a day off or needs, has to be covered. We still have to run a school. We still have to provide these services. So I like the idea of the flexibility. I like the idea that it fits in and that we can still have our own employees and augment them as we go forward, because these are very challenging times. And one way or the other, we have to run a school district and we have to provide the staffing. So I like having this as an option, and I applaud you for looking into this and finding someone that would work with us and augment us the way they are. I think it's a very meritorious program to bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a quick question, and I had a little glitch in my hearing you there for a little bit, but what is the actual bottom line cost to the district on this? I mean, are we just paying per day, is there like a base charge that we need to make sure that we're not that I'm not missing on that's going to cost that the district's going to have to pay?
So there's not a base charge. We're only charged the billed rate when we have one of the SOS substitutes work in our district.
Okay.
Kara, do we have any idea of an anticipated usage for this? Is it daily? Is it sporadic? Is it is there any history to gauge what we would use?
So it was a little bit difficult to pull how many hours we've utilized subs in the past, just because this year we haven't been in the building for the full year. And even last year, we were not in the building for the full year. But we were able to pull the 2018-2019 hours that we use substitutes. And it looks like in the instructional assistant position in the 2018-2019 school year, we used 484 hours of substitutes for the instructional assistant position. So I think I wouldn't say that it's going to be on a daily basis. I think it will be when staff members are sick or if they take a personal day. And again, we really want to be able to use the subs that we have in our district, but we have other vacancies. Right now, we have some instructional assistant vacancies that we're trying to fill as permanent positions. So if we have an applicant, we really want to put them in a permanent position with the district if they're willing. So it doesn't give us the larger applicant pool when someone calls out sick. And if someone would call out sick, we could then reach out to the SOS group if one of those 4 instructional assistant substitutes within our district aren't able to fill that vacancy for the day.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So a big part of this is addressing the problem we've been having in terms of the actual pool, getting substitute teachers in. I think that's the biggest part of this, correct?
Yes.
Substitute instructional assistants.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, any other questions for Tara? Okay, thank you very much, Tara. That was very informative, and I think I see a lot of positives here with that idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that takes us to the 21-22 proposed final budget. Our CFO, Mr. Taylor.
All right. Let me just get that up there. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So we'll follow the process we've been doing before. We talk about the timeline that's left. As you see, it's getting very short. Instead of the 2 slides we had initially, we're down just to the next 3 dates. Next week, the board will be adopting the proposed final budget. Then by May 27th, the proposed final budget will be available for public review. And then on June 16th, we would adopt the final budget. So next week, it's the proposed final budget. There could potentially be changes, but I think we're in pretty substantial form where we'll be at that time. So the assumptions, the value of a mill, we have updated that. The mill is millage rate, which is what we base our real estate taxes off of. And these numbers are now from April 12th of 2021. The value of the mill is now $1,313,503. That is reduced from last year's assessed values for tax purposes, down just over $6 million. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but really that's due to some of the assessed value challenges and adjustments that have been made. So that affects our revenues. As you can see that $6 million adjustment in assessed value is a reduction of $128,000 in actual tax revenue. Other adjustments to our local revenues, proceeds from the sales of fixed assets. We have put in the budget now for revenue of $691,630. And where that comes from is the board's aware and people in the public should be aware that we are refreshing our technology this summer, new systems. We have signed an agreement to sell our old equipment, and they gave us a guaranteed minimum value of $691,630. We will likely get more than that, but we're budgeting the guaranteed minimum at this point in time. State revenues, the only increases we've budgeted are the subsidies for PSERS and FICA, because that's based off of a calculation and percentage of how much we spend. We are not budgeting any increases right now for the basic ed funding or the special education funding. That's tied to the state budget, and there is no resolution on that as of yet. If that changes, we will adjust that for the final budget or adjust it as necessary. Federal revenues, back in April, we showed you that we were allocating $472,000 from the CARES Act funding. That'll be used as a reimbursement for some of our technology purposes. So we have that in the budget as well. Just for a refresher, the CARES Act funding, remember we have the ESSER 2 money, which is 1.7 million. And that is what we are allocating towards the technology refresh. The ESSER 3 money, which is 3.4 million, can be used for a variety of different items. But we aren't budgeting the funds that we have not allocated to an expenditure for next year as of yet. Because as you can see, we can use those funds all the way through September 30th of 2024. And these funds are primarily a reimbursement based. So until we actually spend the money, we don't get the money. So that's why we've only allocated some of the funds at this point. Okay. Expenditure considerations, as we went over before, the salaries, benefits, PSERS, health costs, transportation costs, special ed and cyber, and regular charter school costs. The proposed final budget expenditures. The assumptions we have in there are salaries. We have budgeted for all the contractually required increases in step and column movement based on the teachers' contracts, the support staff. We have budgeted the 3% increase based off the Act 1 index. That is new for this year. The increase is limited by the Act 1 index. And then the administrators' increases are per their Act 93 agreement or other specific contracts. The PSERS retirement rate is up 1.25% growth, which is going to bring it up to 34.94%. And then the health insurance, once again, we're budgeting the 10% increase. And my screen's a little slow at switching to the next slide. There we go. So the allowable millage increase. So some of these numbers are familiar, but I'll show you the adjustments. Our current millage rate is at 20.5106. With a 3% Act 1 index, we can increase it by 0.6153. Now the changes, once again, are the value of a mill, which we updated based off of the new assessed values. And based on that, the allowable increase in the real estate tax revenue based on the millage rate increase, and the value of mill is $775,871. Once again, the proposed, the value of the mill currently in the proposed final budget, it's lower than what I showed you earlier in the difference, the 6 million from last year, but in the preliminary budget, we had shown 1,318,920. Like I said, it's from reduction in assessment appeals. So our proposed final budget has expenditures of $39,946,392, which require the millage rate of 21.1253, which is the increase of the 0.6153 or the 3% limit by the Act 1 index. Budget issues still to be resolved. Actually, it skipped a slide for me. Hang on one second. All right, so here's where the numbers get all into the fine details. So we updated the assessed values up here, which really drives our calculation for the property taxes. We saw last month the CARES Act funding, the $472,000 that we allocated. All right. This next line is the new line that we added. We added the proceeds from the sales of fixed asset, that guaranteed minimum value, which adds $691,630. And like I said, these tax numbers are adjusted for the new assessed value, but also if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, here we have the tax revenues are netted of a 96% collection rate. In the preliminary budget, we had it at a 95% collection rate, being conservative with those numbers. But after reviewing the final numbers of our collections for this year, we are very comfortable at moving up to a 96% rate, which is what we adopted last year. It's still conservative, just based on the concerns of the economy and the COVID and just making sure that we get the money in. But with those adjustments, with the CARES Act funding, the sales of the computers, and the adjustments to the tax revenues, we now have a deficit, or not a deficit, but a balanced budget at zero, with the full tax increase of the 3% allowed by the Act 1 index. Without the CARES funding, it was the 472,000 difference. And if we had no tax increase at all, we'd have to make up 1.5 million. Now, while this is good news that we are at a balanced budget and we're very excited about that, I do want to caution the board and the public on these two numbers right here. These are one-time costs, right? So it's one-time cost from selling the fixed assets and one-time revenue of the fixed assets and then one-time revenue of the CARES funding. And really, to balance your budget, we really should be balancing our budget off of reoccurring revenues versus the reoccurring expenses. While we're comfortable with this, we don't know the outcome of the state budget yet. So when the state budget comes in, really this 691,000 in prior years would be planned for technology infrastructure improvements, which we badly need. But we can allocate it to a balanced budget so we're not reducing staff or making other drastic cuts like we had to last year. But if the state budget comes through with increases, it really should be filling in this gap, and this money should then be reserved for the technology infrastructure. If we don't get that state funding, we will have to find a way in future years to build that tech infrastructure into the budget rather than using these funds, and then make up for the use of these one-time funds. So we're comfortable at this point for this year, but we really could use that increase in state aid to put in reoccurring revenue from the state rather than these one-time costs that we have to be concerned about if we do not get the increase from the state. So if I go to the next slide. All right, so the budget issue is still to be resolved. Like I said, the state budget, the potential increased funding of 1.4 million for the basic ed funding and another 200,000 for special ed. If the governor's budget went through as proposed, that seems very challenging and not likely enough for us to budget at this point. We're only budgeting certainty with the revenues. But if the budget doesn't go through as passed, we're still hoping that there's some sort of increase, and that it's not level funded from last year. Tax assessment adjustments, now that we're getting closer to July. We're hoping there isn't much more reductions. We should be pretty stable now with the numbers we have now. And then if there's any last minute employee retirements that have not been announced yet, we're aware of one retirement at this point in time, but there could potentially be, some more that come in. Then just to fill the board in a little bit more. So that's the budget for this year, but we've talked about long-term financial planning before. We've talked about 5-year forecasting. And that's why we're talking about the reoccurring revenues, balancing the budget rather than one-time revenues. We stopped using fund balance in the past, but we formed that strategic financial planning committee. And on here, I just have what the key questions that we're really trying to answer with it and answers that we have for some of the items and the things that we're still working on. So what is the district's targeted fund balance? Well, in August of 2019, the board adopted a fund balance policy with a goal of building and maintaining a fund balance of 12% of the budget expenditures in the general fund. We also set a target of building up the capital reserve fund to 8%. So we have some ways to go on that, but that's the targets that we're striving for at this point in the long-term financial planning. How do we best position the district to be prepared for renovations and building projects? We have to build up our fund balance. We have to build up our capital reserves, and we have to improve our credit rating to make the cost of borrowing as low as possible. So the next question is how do we improve our credit rating, right? Well, increasing our fund balance, which is part of the prior goal as well. Achieve and maintain balanced operations over the upcoming years, which is why it's important to adopt a balanced budget and to maintain and come in on that balanced budget. But then to manage revenues and tax increases as necessary to meet the current and future financial obligations of the district. That's why, once again, with that one-time funding, while we're able to balance the budget right now, it'd be better if we could sustain it through reoccurring state revenues and local revenues as well. So how do we build our reserves and our fund balance? Well, it's a work in progress, but the strategic use of district's allocation of master funds could be a critical opportunity for the district. So those one-time funds, if we use them on things instead of the annual operating budget, but for one-time costs or reimbursements of costs that we've budgeted, that can help us rebuild our financial reserves as well. And then what is the value of potential tax revenue for district assets that are owned? That's still a process that we're working on to try to determine that information. But that is the proposed final budget and just an update on our long-term financial planning. And we'll now open up to questions from the board.
Any questions from anybody?
Mike, I got a quick question for you. So using the one-time income sources, does that impact our credit rating at all?
It doesn't directly impact it. What would happen is if we didn't use those one-time sources and we're able to rebuild the fund balance with it, that could improve our credit rating. Using it right now, it's not the same as using fund balance up front, but if we don't replace that revenue in then future years and we don't have balanced budgets, then it would. So directly today to use it for a balancing budget, no, but that's where we have the longer term concerns of if we could get the increase in the state funding, it's better to put those money in capital reserves or to use it for that one-time tech infrastructure. The credit rating agency will see how are you balancing your budget. And one of the questions that property owners don't necessarily love, but they like to see boards that are willing to increase tax revenues to meet the future obligations of a district. They do not like districts planning on using fund balance or one-time revenues without a plan on how to make up for them. So yes, if we don't have a plan to make up for the one-time use, then it could damage us. And on the opposite side, if we don't need to use it for operations, it could benefit our credit rating.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Mike, I know I have an idea of what's in our capital reserve right now, but percentage-wise, how far are we falling short of the 12%?
The 12%, yeah. We're quite a ways away. Okay. We need to add millions of dollars to that, right? We're going to be closer to about 4%, 4 or 5%. So we need to triple basically what we have in our fund balance at this point in time. Now, it's not something you do overnight, and the credit rating agencies know that, and we know that. But that's why it's important to plan it strategically. And now, like I said, if the governor's budget comes through as proposed and with proper allocation of the ESSER funds, we can get a nice little jump start here, right? And some of the other things we're doing. But that's why we got to be very strategic and make sure that when we make some of these decisions, yeah, grant money is great, but that we use it properly so that we don't put ourselves in a bind of using the one-time money in the wrong places.
Thank you.
Yep.
And as far as that 96% in terms of actual collections of taxes, what has the actual amount been in terms of percentage over the last few years, ballpark?
It's typically about 97.5%. Actually, this year we're very fortunate. We actually had 98%. A lot of that is from the fact that you have a lot of people have their mortgages escrow their taxes in there, right? And so the mortgage companies were making those payments anyways. But the concern we have and why we still want to be cautious is if we look back to the 2008 recession, a lot of those financial consequences hit in the second and third year, especially with the real estate taxes. So while we had a good year this year and our average has been 97 to 97.5, I think it's better to be a little bit more conservative with the 96% because we don't want to come up short on those on the budgeted revenue.
Yeah, one thing that has to have an impact on it is the rental forgiveness program. You have landlords that aren't getting their monthly rents, and at the same time, they still have to pay their taxes, which could be difficult.
Absolutely, and that's definitely a reason to be conservative with that number.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mike?
I have a question, George. Mike, we get reimbursement, back for meals and transportation, and usually it's like the year behind. At what point is our budget, our revenues are going to be affected with this decrease in our expenditures right now for busing and food services? That's like 2 years out, isn't it?
No, and it's not quite that far out. For food service, we actually submit for monthly reimbursements. So that'll catch up to us this year. Transportation is a year behind. And theoretically, it could be a second year because your transportation subsidy this year is based off of prior year's numbers, right? And I had that same concern that you had of, obviously, we had reduced expenditures this year in busing when we were virtual. And the concern would be as well, next year we'll have the full, expenditures. So working with Mark Donnelly, our Director of Transportation, and checking and see what the different rules are. There's like subsidy waivers that are being out there that you can either go off your current year's numbers or you can get a waiver to apply as if the numbers from the year before. So we are able to use our 1920 numbers rather than the 2021 numbers if we fill out a special waiver form so that we shouldn't be tremendously impacted. And as far as our transportation costs last year, we paid them in the spring. We had to pay the full rate because if we didn't pay the drivers, then we would have lost our subsidy. So we couldn't not pay them at the end of last year. So our subsidy numbers should be okay as long as we follow the process with the specific waivers that we need to fill out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mike? Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, takes us to any other questions or comments on any subject from the board. Okay, seeing none. That takes us to citizen comments. Do we have any, Mike?
There is nobody that signed up in the chat.
Okay, thank you. All right, next operations meeting is June 2nd. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for attending the meeting, and thank you for all the participants.
Thank you.
Okay,
everyone. Have a
Have a
good
good
evening.
evening. Take
Good
care.
night, everyone. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Goodbye.